All the stories we publish on this channel come from our viewers. Real accounts submitted by subscribers and reshaped by us from events we've actually seen or lived through. We upload a new story every day to entertain you, and we hope you enjoy them. Thanks for watching. I'm James Fletcher, a proper Nottingham bloke through and through. Most of my life has been spent in the Midlands, where people tend not to soften their speech. You quickly learn round here that a man's measured by what he does, not by what he promises. I'm 38 now and I've been laying bricks since I was 19. Rain, frost, or blistering heat, I've worked through it all. Building houses I'll probably never be able to buy. Fixing chimneys older than my grandparents. Grinding away week after week just to keep the lights on and food in the cupboards. I met Claire in 2014. I was down in Brighton for a mate's stag do. She wasn't with our group, just sat at a bar near the pier with a couple of friends. She told me she'd grown up in Hastings and had that soft southern seaside accent, and her smile made it look like she'd never known a bad day. I asked her what she was drinking and she shot back, "Not whatever lager you're having." That little snipe somehow did the trick. We did the long distance thing for a year. Every other weekend one of us was on a train, me heading south through London to the coast, or her coming up to Nottingham. Eventually she moved north. I thought she'd settled in all right. She found work as a teaching assistant at a primary school on the edge of town. We rented a modest semi in West Bridgford, and in 2018 we scraped together a deposit and bought it. Nothing flash, but it was ours. For the first few years it felt like we were in step. I'd come home from a long day on site and she'd be in the kitchen making shepherd's pie or a roast with proper Yorkshire puddings. She'd tease me about my love of gravy because she was southern, after all. We'd watch telly, plan little holidays, Cornwall, the lakes. Nothing extravagant, just us. Then, slowly, things began to change. It started when she was promoted to senior assistant. More responsibility, more hours, more staff nights out. They'd head into the Lace Market, one of those places that sells wine by the glass for the price of a good pub meal, and she'd text around 7 or 8, "Don't wait up." At first I told myself she deserved to have a life outside the marriage, but the way she came home shifted. Doors opened later and later. She'd smell faintly of Prosecco and perfume that wasn't hers. Probably something a friend had sprayed for a photo, and she started talking to me like I was an interruption. Ask how her evening went and she'd roll her eyes or say, "Do we have to do this?" Last Friday everything snapped. I'd been working in Derby all week, repointing old Victorian terraces. Long days. My hands were raw from lime mortar and my shoulders ached from ladder work. I decided to knock off early, thinking we could have a quiet tea together. I even went to the chippy on Radcliffe Road, the one she always said did the best haddock, and got her a large with mushy peas. For me, a battered sausage and chips and a can of dandelion and burdock. Walking through the front door, the smell of vinegar and fried batter filled the hall. She was on the sofa, scrolling her phone. "All right, love," I said, setting the bag on the dining table. She glanced at it like it was an unwanted bill. "You could have called. I've already eaten." That stung. I laughed it off, trying to keep things light. Thought I'd surprised her, said we hadn't sat down together all week. Then, without warning, she put her phone down and looked at me deadpan, her face as though carved from stone. "James, don't you get it? You don't deserve me. You don't deserve my time, my effort, and you sure as hell don't deserve my body. I feel like I'm wasting myself here with you." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The telly was on low, the clock ticked, but all I could hear was my blood in my ears. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, like she'd been sitting on them for years, like she'd been waiting for the right time to say it. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, looking at her. In my trade you learn to measure twice before you cut. In that moment I was measuring what this marriage had become. I took my plate into the kitchen and ate standing at the counter, taste completely gone. She stayed in the lounge. I could feel her waiting for me to come back and start a row to try and patch it up. But I'd already made my decision. When she went to bed, I stayed downstairs. At around midnight, I quietly went into the spare room, pulled the suitcases from the top of the wardrobe, and began packing her things. I wasn't being theatrical about it. I folded everything neatly. Her work clothes, dresses, the coat she loved, even the silly heels she rarely wore. I placed her makeup and jewelry in a small bag on top. By sunrise, the bags were by the front door. I made a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table. At about 8, she came downstairs in one of my old t-shirts. Hair a mess, half asleep. She stopped dead when she saw the bags. "What's this?" she asked. I sipped my tea and kept my voice level. "You're ungrateful, Claire. You made it perfectly clear you don't respect me. So you can go back to your mum's in Hastings. And just so there's no confusion, you won't get a single penny from me. Not for rent, not for bills, not for anything." Her mouth fell open. "You can't just..." "I can't," she started. I cut across her. "The mortgage is in my name. Council tax is in my name. You've been here because I wanted you here, not because you own part of it." She tried another angle. "James, don't be ridiculous. We're married. Married people don't speak to each other like the way you did last night." I stood, grabbed the bags and set them outside. "Taxi'll be here in 10. Get dressed." The way she looked at me wasn't grief so much as disbelief, like she'd never expected me to be the one to walk away. But I was finished. Completely done. At 8:30 the taxi pulled up. She muttered something under her breath, pulled her coat tight and walked out without looking back. I shut the door and leaned against it. The house settled into a silence that wrapped around me like a blanket. It wasn't exactly relief, more like stepping out of a room full of cigarette smoke into clean air. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The real trouble was only just beginning. 3 days later there was a knock at my door that dragged her back into my life in a way I wasn't ready for. 3 days after I'd sent Claire back to her mum's in Hastings, someone knocked on my door and my gut tightened. It wasn't a neighbor or the postman. It was that firm, businesslike knock-you-know-means official business. When I opened it, a woman in a black coat stood there with a clipboard. "Mr. James Fletcher?" she asked with that soft Sussex lilt. "Yeah," I said. She handed me a thick envelope. "You've been served. Please read and act upon it." Then she turned and walked away. I closed the door, slipped my thumb under the flap and pulled out the papers. It was from a solicitor in St. Leonard's-on-Sea, Claire's side. I discovered she'd registered home rights under the Family Law Act 1996. Essentially, even though the house was in my name, she was lodging a legal claim to live there. The letter also said she intended to pursue financial relief and, if necessary, an occupation order to force her way back in. And the cherry on top, spousal maintenance, monthly payments from me to her. My first thought was to ring her and tell her exactly what I thought. But I could already hear my mate Tom in my head. "Don't go off on one, lad. Get legal advice first." So I rang him. Tom's a foreman up in Manchester, and when I told him what had happened, he didn't mince his words. "Right. Get yourself a solicitor today. And for God's sake don't put anything stupid in writing." That afternoon I sat in the office of Priya Shaw, a Nottingham-born family solicitor, who looked like she could dismantle an argument with a single raised eyebrow. I told her everything. How Claire had spoken that Friday, how I'd packed her bags and sent her off in a taxi. She read the paperwork and explained that Claire did have a registered right to occupation. It doesn't give her ownership, but it does mean you can't lock her out without a court order. If she decides to come back, you could find yourself in a legal bind. But Priya told me, she can't just do as she pleases either. We'd set boundaries, keep any contact in writing, and not suddenly cut off joint payments without planning. Courts don't like abrupt financial blackouts unless they're justified. I'd said I wasn't going to give her a penny. Priya gave me a look that wasn't angry, just firm. "Don't say that to her again," she said. "We'll handle the money in negotiations." On the way home, I stopped at Greg's for a sausage roll and a tea. Outside, it was a typical Nottingham drizzle. People hunched into their hoods, small courtesies exchanged, doors held, someone shouting cheers to the bus driver. It grounded me a bit. That evening Claire messaged from a number I didn't recognize. "I'm coming back Saturday at 10 o'clock to get the rest of my things. I have the right to enter. Don't make this difficult." I waited half an hour, then replied, "Saturday 10 is fine. I won't be home." "Saturday 10 is fine. I won't be home. Boxes will be by the side gate. Bring someone to help. My neighbor Karen will keep an eye, just to keep things civil." She didn't reply. Saturday arrived with that heavy, queasy feeling in my gut. I'd packed everything. Clothes, shoes, her hairdryer, the little decorative bits she liked splurging on from those overpriced homeware shops. I even made an inventory and taped it to every box. Karen, my next-door neighbor, a retired nurse from Leicester, sat in her bay window with a mug of tea like a sentinel. I went for a drive out to Sherwood Forest to keep out of the way. When I came back, the boxes were gone and a letter lay on the doormat. More paperwork from her solicitor. Now she was demanding monthly payments until she found somewhere else to live and was back in work. I rang Priya first thing on Monday. She told me to keep calm and that she'd send a formal response. We'd propose a temporary arrangement if needed, she said, but nothing permanent. And if she was working, she'd have to show her income. This wasn't an open check. The next Wednesday, another letter landed. This one was angrier, accusing me of coercive control by restricting finances and excluding her. That one hit me hard. I knew the law had changed a few years back. Coercive control is a criminal offense. The thought of being lumped in with men who trap or threaten partners made my hands tremble. Priya stayed steady. She said allegations like that are often tactical. Don't give them ammunition. No late-night angry messages. No public outbursts. Keep records of offering collection times and gather witness statements from people like Karen. That night I sat in the kitchen long after the plates were cleared, listening to the fridge hum. The house felt strange, like it was holding its breath. A week later the court sent notice. Claire had applied for an occupation order to move back into the house. My chest tightened reading it. She claimed the home was emotionally unsafe for her and that I'd thrown her out with nothing. Priya and I prepared my witness statement. We included everything. Her exact words that Friday night, the fact I'd packed her clothes carefully, booked her a taxi, offered specific collection times, and that Karen could vouch for me. We added photos of the boxes, copies of my messages, and even my budget to show what I actually earned and spent. The hearing was set for the following Tuesday. I didn't sleep much the night before, just stared at the ceiling, running through every question the judge might ask. The morning was cold and clear. I took the bus because parking near the court is a nightmare. Claire arrived with her solicitor. She looked smaller than I remembered, hair pulled back tight, wearing the coat I'd bought her last Christmas. For a moment, I wondered how we'd gone from bright nights and shared chips on the seafront to this. The judge was a middle-aged woman with a calm that made you pay attention. She asked if there had been violence. No. If I denied her belongings. No. We had the evidence. After hearing both sides, she suggested undertakings instead of granting a full occupation order. I'd allow one last supervised collection if necessary, and she'd agree not to turn up unannounced. No findings against me, no order giving her the right to move back in. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to breathe again. Outside the court, Priya said, "We've kept you in your home. The rest, divorce and finances, we'll handle next." On the bus home, the city rolled by. Terraces, little shops, school kids in polos. Life carried on even when yours feels shattered. I made a promise to myself then. I wouldn't be dragged into a mud fight. I'd stick to the facts and stay steady. Just when I thought the worst of the day was over, an email from her solicitor landed in my inbox with an attachment they'd clearly sent by mistake, a copy of her bank statement. When I opened it and scanned the transactions, the pattern jumped out. It wasn't that she was broke, it was where the money was going. Multiple payments to hotels in Eastbourne, Brighton, and even London in the last 2 months. Restaurant tabs at pricey places in Southwark and Covent Garden. Then a series of transfers marked only with a man's first name and a heart emoji, the same amount every week. For someone claiming financial hardship, she seemed to be living far above that. I forwarded the email to Priya with a short note. This came from her solicitor by mistake. Want to see it? 5 minutes later she rang. "I've seen it," she said, sharper than usual. "This changes things. We can argue there's no financial need for spousal maintenance. If she's funding this lifestyle, and if there's someone supporting her, it matters for the settlement." For the first time in weeks, I felt I had the upper hand. That weekend I went through my own paperwork with a fine-tooth comb, partly for court and partly for my sanity. I kept thinking about the nights she'd come home late, smelling faintly of wine and a perfume that wasn't hers, staff drinks that went on too long. I'd assumed she was just trying to keep a social life. Now it looked like she'd been laying the groundwork for this exit for months. On Monday, Priya sent Claire's solicitor a letter referencing the newly disclosed financial documents that conflicted with Claire's claims of hardship. We didn't accuse her of lying, that would have been reckless, but we invited them to explain the significant discretionary spending shown in the statements. Their reply 2 days later was pure theater. The transactions were personal and private, and not relevant to whether I should contribute to her living costs. They didn't deny the entries. They just wanted them off the table. Too late. They were already out. Meanwhile, the divorce paperwork moved along. I applied online for a no-fault divorce, ticking the box that said the marriage had broken down irretrievably. There's a minimum 20-week wait before the conditional order. Those months could have felt endless, but I kept busy. Long days at work, runs along the Trent in the mornings, tea with Karen in the evenings, Sundays seeing my dad in Mansfield. About a month later, Claire tried one more move. A letter saying she intended to visit the house to inspect its condition. Priya shut that down with a polite but firm refusal, reminding them of the court undertakings. She was not to show up without arrangement, and there was no legal basis for a personal inspection. Still, I left the front step camera running just in case. The real turning point came at the first financial hearing, the FDR, where both sides set out finances and try to settle before a judge decides. Priya had my income, outgoings, pension, car finance and mortgage all neatly presented. When it was Claire's turn, her figures didn't line up with the reality the accidental bank statement had shown. Priya didn't need to shout. She asked calm, pointed questions about hospitality expenses and travel outside Hastings during a period Claire claimed to be unemployed and without disposable income. The judge, a no-nonsense Yorkshireman, raised an eyebrow more than once. By the end of the session, the picture was clear. No spousal maintenance. The house stays with me. Her only claim was those limited home rights, which would lapse once the divorce was final. The only concession was a one-off payment to cover moving costs, which I agreed to just to close the chapter. As we left the courtroom, Priya said, "You played this exactly right. You didn't react emotionally or feed her narrative." In the end, her own evidence sunk her case. It was a strange feeling, not joy exactly, but a release. For months I'd been braced for the next demand or another attempt to paint me as a controlling monster. Now it was over. About a week after the settlement, Claire sent one last message from her old number. "So that's it. After everything, you're just done with me?" I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't drag me back. Instead, I went to the pub with Tom and Saf that night. We had a pint, played darts, and for the first time in ages I laughed properly. Life didn't change overnight, but it started moving again. I repainted the spare room, bought a decent coffee machine, and joined a local cycling group that heads into the peaks on Sundays. Little things reminded me the house and my life were mine again. Some mornings I'd pick up a sausage carb from the corner bakery and eat it while the city woke. Passing people heading to work, kids in uniform, buses hissing at stops, I'd think, this is peace. Not a grand gesture or cinematic ending. Just ordinary days without someone trying to tear you down in your own home. A couple of months later, the divorce was final. The decree absolute arrived in a plain brown envelope, as unceremonious as a utility bill. I stood in the kitchen holding it, the fridge humming behind me, and realized I didn't feel loss anymore, only clarity. Claire could live as she liked now, spend money in London restaurants with whoever that man was, tell whatever version of events suited her. None of it touched me because the truth was simple. The moment she looked at me that Friday night and said, "You don't deserve me. You don't deserve my body," she had already walked out. Her body just took a few days to follow. I'd opened the door and made sure it stayed shut behind her. That's how it ended. No shouting, no begging, no going back. For all the paperwork, hearings and solicitor fees, it was the quiet decision to pack her bags and not back down that truly saved me.